If you like your CNN Scott Jennings porn, don't worry, it's softcore. But if you like that, then you're going to like this show because he just exploded all over the set when liberals tried to push back on him. And he took part of CNN down with him. They didn't even know what they were doing. It's great. You're going to love it. Just trust me on that. Also, Trump's tariffs already working. He's not even president yet, and he hasn't even applied any tariffs yet. But it's working. We'll show you how in a moment. And Tom Homan squaring off over the border with Democrats in cities and states who refuse to work with Homeland Security. He's ready on day one for the throwdown that's inevitable. You're going to see all of that. And The View and other parts of the liberal media really angry that Jack Smith has dropped his case against Donald Trump. It's a good day in America when Donald Trump doesn't have to face a courtroom and when Whoopi Goldberg and Adam Schiff are upset. You're going to see all of that and a whole lot more coming up right now. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. Happy Turkey Week to you. I loved the turkey emojis yesterday in the chat. So if you want to add your turkey emojis, by the way, if you're one of those people who doesn't eat turkey on Thanksgiving Day or doesn't like turkey, okay, you can give me some potatoes. I like potatoes. I don't think there's a stuffing emoji. Of course, if you do the potato emoji, I'm going to think you're talking about Brian Stelter. So I'm confused. I'm torn. Either way, give me your favorite. How about football? That we got. Give me a football and a lion emoji in the chat today. That would be awesome as we celebrate a Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. It's all about family, football, faith, and food. I threw faith in there because it's 4 F's. I prefer that. Thanks for watching our live stream here on YouTube, on Rumble, on Facebook, and on X. Give us a like if you don't mind, just so we can let other people. Yesterday, you all liked me right at the beginning and gave me the turkey emojis, and it boomed across our live stream, and our live audience just blew up. So do that again because we love to have a lot of people going in the chat room. Oh, and before I forget, if you like some Larry, if you enjoy what I do and how I bring it to the table every day, then tomorrow night, set a calendar schedule or whatever it is you do, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. I am filling in for the great one, Mark Levin. That's right, on the Mark Levin Show. If you like the Mark Levin radio program, then you'll hear me for 3 hours doing his show as his guest host tomorrow night. Thanks for that. Remind me because I'll forget. I want to tell you that tomorrow as well. Let's get right to it. You know that we love Scott Jennings over here. He's the only reason to tune into CNN these days. I mean, other than to watch Jake Tapper have a meltdown at any given time because things aren't really going his way. But Scott Jennings is the man, and he proved it again last night. There's so much to pull from here. So let's get right to it with this first clip. Wow, look at her. Her face. She's really sad. Look at it. I love when the chyron matches the expression on the liberal's face. Musk and MAGA muse about buying liberal network MSNBC. Zoinks? What? That's beautiful.
CNN contributor Carrie Champion joins us in our 5th seat. So, Carrie, I want to ask you about this idea of media takeover because after Elon Musk purchased Twitter, changed it into X, there's no doubt that he exercised some power there. So how do you hear this even ingest kind of purchase of a cable network?
Good to be with you tonight.
Good to be with you as well.
Thanks for having me. I think that we should believe everything that is said coming from this administration. I don't think that we have the luxury to dismiss it as him being someone who's being funny or someone who is just being himself or that is his brand. X, and you said in some ways, always. I feel like X, I don't know if anyone is on it in any capacity. I don't know if you're on it. And you're the only one? You're on it? You all are on it? Okay. I've actually decided to take a rest of peace because it is not a peaceful place for me. And I know if in fact you don't agree with this current administration, most people can say that it's not a peaceful place. I wouldn't be surprised if there was an actual bid made to take on MSNBC, but the fact that it just can't happen in real life.
And we just can't.
It's not even
for sale.
It's not officially for sale.
The last
it's not
time
even
he
realistic.
mused about maybe buying something.
It's not even realistic in real life, but I do believe that media, everyone sitting here at this table, if you don't agree, we're in for some tough years ahead. I do believe that we are not going to be able to be as safe or say what we want to. I don't think free speech is going to be as free.
I love Scott Jennings' reaction there because he's with all of us right now. What are you talking about? free speech is not free because I'm actually hearing voices that I don't want to hear, that I'm not used to hearing. No, that's the definition of free speech. It's not a safe place for you. It's not a peaceful place. So understand something. Liberals in America, especially the intellectual elite liberals represented by this young lady here on CNN, they've lived in their own little safe space intellectual bubble basically their entire careers, from public schools to advanced degrees and higher education and colleges and universities, and then in their little media bubbles all the way across the line. They've never actually heard opposing views. And the second opposing views started creeping into Twitter, well, Twitter decided to silence and censor and delete accounts and ban them from daring to actually push back on the dogma that the left constantly knows is the God's honest truth, right? So to them, hearing opposing viewpoints uncensored and completely unencumbered straight into their feed, that's unsafe. That's unpeaceful. And so she needs to take a break from that. The idea that Elon Musk just can't buy MSNBC, that's not happening in reality. Isn't that exactly what they said about him buying Twitter in the first place? So I honestly, if they're trying to egg him on and goad him into buying MSNBC, they're doing a pretty good job of it. But the conversation continues, and understand, Scott's sitting there, you know, he's got his pocket square going. He's going with the no tie look. It's like he's been watching this show. Jacket, dress shirt, no tie is the trend of the future, my friends. Scott, I'm glad that you're picking up on the look, the high fashion that we've been doing here on the Larry Show at Town Hall for the last 1 year plus. But he's just biding his time. He's keeping his powder dry. We know Scott when he's ready to pounce. He's almost there.
That there's still a litmus test of journalism that you have to pass. You can't come on TV and just make up things and say things. That happens on X. Please don't give me the eyebrow furrow as if you don't know what I'm talking about. It happens often on X. I can go and say the color is blue, and I will be met with so many disrespectful remarks. No one's regulating the N-word. No one's regulating the criticism. No one is regulating how people are treated.
How much government regulation?
So real fast, I hope it's not, the irony is not lost on anyone that in the context of a conversation about MSNBC that's taking place on CNN, this woman says, well, you know, the problem is there are no journalistic standards there on X. And that, you know, that they're not beholden to the truth like we are here. This is a network that built its entire newsroom around the Russian collusion hoax. And they're talking about MSNBC that had, you know, story after story after story about Donald Trump being Hitler, the Madison Square Garden rally being a Nazi rally, and Kamala Harris is definitely on the verge of victory. Everybody, trust us on this. Don't believe the polls you're looking at. So she's talking about journalistic ethics and standards about MSNBC while sitting on the set of CNN. And Scott Jennings is all of us just saying, are you listening to yourself? Do you hear yourself? Well, let's take one journalistic standard right now that CNN pretends to extol, which is fair and balanced, all viewpoints in a balanced way represented. And let's just count the voices at the table that I'm sitting at right now. It's 5 against 1. And you're telling me journalistic standards need to be the ideal and the norm? But that's exactly what she's saying. And I'm glad Scott's ready to start pushing back now.
Of the First Amendment are you for?
Let me tell you something. If I came on here and
Hold on. You know what? What happened there? Let me restart that because he asked a very important question. Here is a journalist in the United States of America calling for regulation of speech on X. And Scott Jennings asked the most salient question of all.
It's regulating how people are treated.
How much government regulation of the First Amendment are you for?
Let me tell you something. If I came on here and I just started calling you all kind of names, do you think the bosses would let me continue to do that?
I mean, it happens to me occasionally. I don't know if you watch the show.
It doesn't happen to you, but it doesn't happen for me. And I know that I wouldn't be able to do that. There's a level of professionalism in what we do here because we are journalists and we adhere to something, at least morally. And there is no moral compass on this thing called X.
There's no moral compass on X. So we want regulation to force people to exercise a moral compass. And did you see the pivot that she did there? You may not have noticed it, and it didn't look like Scott noticed it at that moment. And that's why we're here to sort of give you our analysis and commentary on it so you don't miss it either. Scott Jennings asked the salient question, how much government regulation of free speech are you advocating for here? And her response is, well, do you think I could sit here and just call you names without the bosses coming down on me? And boom, that's the pivot. That's the pivot that the left always tries to get away with because, ma'am, miss, darling, a company regulating what you say or don't say on their privately held, corporate-owned piece of media is 1,000 times different than the government regulating what you say on the public airwaves or on corporate media or on social media or just standing on the sidewalk. Do I like that CNN regulates what people on this panel say and don't say? No, I don't. But guess what? That's different than the government regulating it. By the way, as I rail against corporate media, surprise, surprise, Town Hall is owned by a corporate organization, a great company called Salem Media. I love them. They're a publicly traded company, but they are corporate media. And guess what? If I started saying things that were objectionable to the CEO and by extension shareholders of Salem Media, I might have a talking to. I might, if I continue it, they may cancel this show. That's their right because they own this channel that you're watching right now. I'm their employee. Right now, they like what I say. I mean, but guess what? That's very different than the government. And she just made that pivot there before your very eyes. And, well, she just doesn't get it. I'm sorry, but the government should not regulate what's said on cable news or on social media for that matter. And, well, I guess you have to be a liberal to disagree with that. The conversation continues. It gets even better.
Realistic in real life, but I do believe that media, everyone sitting here at this table, if you don't agree, we're in for some tough years ahead. I do believe that we are not going to be able to be as safe or say what we want to. I don't think free speech is going to be as free.
Now, Scott, I want to bring you in here because this kind of link to Orban, we don't pull it from nowhere. There was a former member of the Hungarian parliament who was writing in Politico who kind of talked about this effort by that government and how specific it was in terms of purchasing media specifically for propaganda. Do you hear why they're making that connection?
I mean, is the concern that certain media outlets would become propaganda arms of political ideologies? I mean, don't we already have that in this country at a large scale? I mean, also, I heard what you're saying about X. I saw a survey this week. It's now the most ideologically balanced user platform.
Scott, stop. It's too early. I just sat down. I've only been here for 2 minutes. You cannot continue to say that. You cannot say that. That's not the case. Who's the source of that?
What I find, we reported it on this network.
It's not accurate, and you know it.
Okay, I'll let you make your statement.
Can I
all right, we're going to go back to that in just a second. But did you see what happened there? That is so glorious. Scott Jennings says, by the way, there's a survey out, a report that shows that X is actually the most ideologically balanced platform that exists right now. They all said, what are you talking about? That's outrageous. What's your source? And she said, well, he reported it on CNN. And they said, well, that's not accurate. In other words, we reported something right here on this network, and it's not accurate. He just got CNN to own themselves in real time on their own panel. What's your source? Well, we reported it here on CNN. Well, it's not accurate. So I'm sorry, CNN person, are you saying that something on CNN is not accurate? Okay. Well, that's kind of a problem for CNN, isn't it? And of course, Scott Jennings, we're going to get back to this clip in a second, but let's go straight to this clip. Scott Jennings was, of course, correct. This was the report on CNN the day before the panel you're watching. Take a look.
Party ID among those who regularly use X/Twitter for news. Back in 2022, 65% of those who regularly use Twitter/X for news were Democrats. Just 31% were Republicans. Look at where we are today. Just a completely different picture. Now it's basically split between Democrats at 48%, Republicans at 47%. And what I should note, Mr. Berman, is this new overall makeup matches the overall electorate far better. Look at this.
That's right. So, I mean, that was what CNN said the day before. Scott Jennings, of course, watches CNN. I guess the other people on that panel don't watch CNN, probably because they can't trust CNN, because they just admitted on their own show that something reported on CNN is probably not accurate. So let me roll back the tape on this clip now so you can see that exchange one more time. It's chef's kiss perfection.
This week, it's now the most ideologically balanced user platform.
Scott,
of any platform.
stop. It's too early. I just
I
sat
know.
down. I've
You're
only
gonna-
been here for 2
You're going to
minutes.
be
You
embarrassed
cannot
when I tweet
continue
out
to
after
say.
the show, but
You
it's true.
cannot say that.
So-
That's not the case.
So
Who's
what
the
I-
source?
What I find, we reported it on this network. And
It's
so-
not accurate, and you know it.
Okay, I'll let you make your statement.
Scott, can I
but my
think of
point
it?
is
Can I
this.
reframe it a different way? Because the site changed radically, right? So whether you think the voices it is somehow more balanced now, that's fine. But no doubt Musk's influence is profound, and that you open it up and now you're there with his opinion, and he is now part of this administration. So does anyone else think that there should be this greater concern about billionaires purchasing media companies?
Okay. Would you be worried if Bill Gates controlled MSNBC?
No, because
Because-
he's sane.
Because
Also,
MS
didn't
in
they- yeah,
MSNBC
it was MS.
comes from Microsoft. It was a partnership between Microsoft and NBC way back in the 1990s, back when Microsoft was under investigation by Bill Clinton's DOJ for monopoly. I don't remember anybody panicking over MSNBC back then.
No, they definitely did. But yeah, continue.
Well,
Well, like Fox was
Yeah.
launching, MSNBC was
And it's
launching,
still
the
here.
cable news network was shifting, the landscape.
But
was
isn't
shifting.
the issue that the left has gotten so used to controlling almost all institutional information distribution arms in this country that when one little piece of it, whether it's X or MSNBC or anything else, gets taken
No.
away, the panic is so outrageous. I mean, that's how used to the
No.
left is
I
having
think-
control of all of it.
That is exactly right. Thank you, Newsbusters. As always, that was Jim Garrity from National Review making the point about Bill Gates and Microsoft. By the way, the lack of historical understanding of media in this country by people who work in media, maybe it's me, but if you get a journalism degree in this country, which is useless, by the way, and I wouldn't recommend anyone to get one, the best people that I know that work in the media right now, even reporters or teleprompter readers or analysts like me, the best people who do that job right now don't actually have journalism degrees. They have English majors, history majors, business majors, a well-rounded kind of education, or like yours truly, no major at all, because I bypassed college and actually lived a real life with a real job. And I think that makes me more qualified to comment on politics and the economy and family life than anyone else, because I've been living it my entire adult life instead of being cushioned and bubbled inside a college university experience. But that's a whole other tangent. Don't you have any inkling of history, for God's sake, of media in America? If you get that journalism degree, shouldn't you even know something about where journalism came from? Have you ever heard, you give out Pulitzer Prizes every single year for the best in journalism. Google who Pulitzer was. Google who William Randolph Hearst was. We can't have billionaires owning media outlets. Are you kidding me? Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, probably the most influential newspaper or news outlet in America because of its proximity to power in Washington, D.C. Jeff Bezos purchased the Washington Post. Were these people screaming about, did they have a panel discussion? Should we be worried about billionaires purchasing media outlets? Jeff Bezos just purchased the Washington Post about 3 or 4 years ago. But it's only a problem if Elon Musk does it, if he doesn't toe the line, if he doesn't agree with them. They're not concerned about billionaires owning media outlets. They're concerned about billionaires who aren't in their camp, who aren't on their team purchasing media outlets. And it's so obvious that that's the case. But, but this is CNN, and this is what CNN is doing now. In fact, last night, after that navel-gazing conversation about the future of media and about where CNN stands, and Scott Jennings getting CNN to do a beautiful self-own in that panel by saying, well, where was that reported? CNN? Well, you can't believe that crap. And then an hour later on their own programming, here's CNN again. They did a they did a segment on Scott Presler. We've been talking about Scott Presler a lot for the last year or two. Been following this guy for a long time. He's a Northern Virginia kid who loved Trump, wanted to register Republicans, moves to Pennsylvania, flips county after county, single-handedly helped Pennsylvania turn red this time, right? So CNN decides to do a profile on him. Okay, that's fine. But look at the chyron. Controversial activist helps Trump win Pennsylvania by targeting Amish. Look at what they did there. Controversial. What? If you're going to call somebody controversial, shouldn't you back that up and explain exactly what's controversial about him? Can someone please explain to me what's controversial about Scott Presler? What, that he's got long hair? That he's tall? That he's a nice guy? No, you know what controversial means. When the chyron writer at CNN describes somebody as controversial, what it means is he supports Trump. And in this context, even more so, he doesn't fit the proper demographic to support Trump. Scott Presler is a young man. He happens to be gay, by the way, if that matters to anyone. I know it matters to the identity politics creeps over at CNN. That's what makes him controversial. Because if you're a young gay man, you're not supposed to like Trump. You're supposed to think he's Hitler. So therefore, clearly he's controversial. But so right there on the chyron, they're showing why they're losing, why they're imploding on a regular basis. But then look what they tried to do with Scott during this interview. And boy, oh boy, did Presler push back. And again, beautifully, perfectly, owning CNN on their own network during their own interview. I'm just impressed that they kept it in and didn't edit it out.
I noticed that when you urge people to action,
Yes.
you often include the word
Peacefully.
Is that to avoid another Jan 6 type incident?
With all due respect, it's to avoid people like you guys saying that I'm anything but. My motto is to just be super cute, have my data and facts, treat everyone with love and respect. And as you can see, an army of people will follow.
By the way, I love the fact that he leads with be super cute. Here's my plan for the day. Number one, first and foremost, be super cute. He's a great guy. But did you see what he did there? Why do you always say that people have to be peaceful? Why do they have to act peacefully when they try to take back the county? When you're call to action, why do you always include peacefully? Is it because you know in your heart that they're really just Jan 6 rioters about to, burn down our country in an insurrection? No, with all due respect, I say peacefully just to shut you people up, to keep you from mischaracterizing everything I do and everything I say. That's exquisite. That's beautiful. I love that we are now emboldened. They are on the run. They still don't know why they suck. They still don't know how to fix it. And yet they're trying. And so they bring Scott Presler in. They bring Jim Garrity on the panel. They go and interview Scott Presler, but they still can't help themselves. And then we get the opportunity, using their own cameras and their own lights and their own microphones, to show the world how they continue to suck. It's beautiful. If they'd like to fix themselves over at CNN, I've got a secret as to how you could do it. But you got to call me. I'm not going to give it away for free. Call me, CNN. I'll help you out. I will. All right, quickly, got to sneeze. Okay,
Bless you.
I have that up. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hopefully I have that out of my system now. Ready? Yes. Donald Trump is not yet president, but he's acting like one. I've heard it said you can only have one president at a time, and I think that one president right now is Donald Trump. He made an announcement yesterday that shook the financial markets in North America, and also, it appears, made a significant change in policies of our two neighbors, Canada and New Mexico. Let's get right to it. Here's the post that he put out on Truth Social. As everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring in through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never before seen. By the way, I love the fact that he starts this with, as everyone is already aware, because he's preempting people saying, well, actually, let me fact check that because that's not exactly true. No. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows that this is the case. Right now, a caravan coming from Mexico composed of thousands of people seems to be unstoppable in its quest to come through our currently open border. On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. Remember yesterday when we talked about the trial balloon they floated out there about potentially discharging on a medical discharge transgender individuals in the military? And I told you this transition team has moved at such lightning speed. They've already filled all of the major positions in the incoming administration. There's a very small handful still to be filled. So now what are they going to do to dominate the news narrative between Thanksgiving and Inauguration Day? Because usually a transition team trickles out. Remember this conversation yesterday? And I told you, expect to see policy. Now the conversation is going to be about policy instead of about the people who will fill these slots. Expect the Trump transition team or Trump himself to be telling you what he plans to do and start trickling out policy ideas. Yesterday it was transgender military, and day before it was transgender military. The next day it was this tariffs on Canada and Mexico. This is going to be interesting and it's going to be fun. And just like the campaign, it's going to be very policy driven. It's about what you can do to fix the problems we've got. Love that. All right. Charge Mexico and Canada 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long-simmering problem. We hereby demand that they use the power, and until such time that they do, it is time for them to pay a very big price. This is the president-elect not only telegraphing 2 months out what our neighbors should expect and what we expect of them as good neighbors when he becomes president, but he's also telegraphing to the American people that our current president could do this and could have been doing this for the last 3+ years. Every time they wring their hands and say this fentanyl problem, I wish we could do something about it. You can. You just refuse to. Instead, you like to put out a meme or maybe a 60-second TikTok video about how deeply you care about this, or maybe show up on Meet the Press to talk about how deeply you care about it, but you don't do anything. Here's Trump before he even takes office doing something. One more that he put out a little later. I've had many talks with China about the massive amount of drugs, in particular fentanyl, being sent into the United States, but to no avail. Representatives of China told me that they would institute their maximum penalty, death, for any drug dealers caught doing this, but unfortunately, they never followed through, and drugs are pouring into our country, mostly through Mexico, at levels never seen before. Until such time as they stop, we will be charging China an additional 10% tariff above any additional tariffs on all of their many products coming into the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I like that. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Like he's signing off an inner office memorandum. China can stop fentanyl from leaving their country like that. It's a totalitarian state. They're authoritarians. It's a police state. They know exactly who's manufacturing the fentanyl. In fact, anybody who's dealing in fentanyl right now and without any penalty shipping it to Mexico to be brought into this country, they're doing it not just with the tacit approval of Beijing, they're doing it with the full-on approval and support of the Communist Party of China. That's how authoritarian countries work. China's doing it on purpose. And so Trump is now saying, fine, 10% across the board over and above whatever tariffs we've already got. And everyone's going to say, oh my gosh, that's going to make everything so expensive here in this country. Good. Okay. So 2 answers to that. Well, 3 answers, really. The first answer is maybe people who are manufacturing in China, utilizing slave labor and contributing to a government that is poisoning Americans with fentanyl. Maybe those corporations that are exploiting that cheap labor and helping prop up that government who's killing Americans, maybe they should rethink their business partners overseas, number one. Number two, maybe we should get used to paying a little more for products because we shouldn't also enjoy low prices that exploit all of those, the cheap slave labor in China, as well as contributing to harming Americans. And number three, this is just the threat of a tariff, guys. It's the threat of a tariff. Trump can't do anything for 2 more months. So the question is, will this threat work? Let's look at exactly the breakdown here. Mexico, 25% on all products. Canada, 25%. China, 10%. Oh, one other thing. Oh my gosh, this is going to hurt our economy. It's going to kill our economy if we do these tariffs. It's going to kill Canada, Mexico, and China's economies that much more. We are the largest market on the planet. On the planet. If we stop taking imports from China, China dies. Okay? We are the number one trading partner with Canada. If we stop taking products from Canada, Canada's already in a world of hurt. They get hurt even more. This is Trump using his leverage in a negotiating, saying, okay, we know what we want them to do. We want them to close the borders and stop the fentanyl. So that's what they've got that we want. What have we got that they want? And what we've got is the largest purchasing power, biggest consumer market on the planet. That's what they need from us. And without us buying their crap, their history, and they know it. So this is how you work out a deal. Now, I remember interviewing Newt Gingrich during the first Trump administration. He had a great book called Understanding Trump. And the whole thesis of the book is like, why does Trump do this? Why does Trump do that? And the answer to almost every question is read Art of the Deal. If you have not read Art of the Deal, Donald Trump's book from the late 80s, if you haven't read that, you'll never really understand Donald Trump. And he's right. This is about putting yourself in the position to be in power, in the power seat during a negotiation. Trump knows what we have that they want. So he's now threatening them with that thing unless they do what we want. That's how you negotiate. Over on CNN last night, if we could, Shermichael Singleton did a pretty good job of sort of breaking this down for the viewers there.
Do you think that voters are the only audience for a criminal proceeding? I mean, that would be disingenuous if you only focus on it because of politics. If voters are one thing, but jurors and the courts are another different topic.
Well, jurors are voters. And I think we have the verdict. The jury is out, right? And the American people decided that they wanted to give the former president another 4 years, regardless of what their views were on what he may or may not have done. And we have, again, a lot of data on what people's opinions are about the former president and his behavior. And despite all of those facts, they still said, I don't care. Because I believe he's better on the economy. I believe he's better on cost of living. I believe he's better on economic dislocation. I believe he's better on immigration.
All right. By now, you probably realize that that is the wrong Shermichael clip. So I will now share with you the correct Shermichael Singleton clip. Sorry about that.
I mean, look, I think if you look at the statements from the president of the EU maybe 2 months ago, and she stated maybe we should reconsider purchasing liquid gas, I believe, from Russia and the United States out of concern or fear of potential tariffs from Trump. So if the argument is made that it can be utilized as I guess, a bargaining tool, if you will, to lower or level the playing field, perhaps there's some evidence to suggest that. If the argument is that, as Trump has said in some inartful ways, that NAFTA didn't necessarily benefit blue-collar workers, there's a significant amount of economic evidence to back and support that claim. So I want to see where the president-elect goes with this, along with his economic team of advisors, Laura. But I do think there are some areas of focus that they could potentially hone in on that could benefit working-class people.
There you go. And so what are the results of this? You just heard Shermichael pretty much lay out there and explain, listen, he has threatened this. He didn't even have to threaten anything with the EU. He won the presidency, and immediately you see the head of the EU and the chancellor of Germany saying, maybe we should start looking at liquid gas from America instead of getting things from Russia and everything. So you start to see net repercussions. You see results of these policies even before, again, 2 months before he's president. So what was the result? Well, let's take a look at the world monetary markets here. Opening this morning, after this threat of tariffs on Mexico and Canada is leveled. And what do we see? Well, we see, if you look all the way down at the bottom, these are the currency markets, right? all the way down at the bottom. See that giant red line there? Red is bad. Red means your currency is taking a hit against the US dollar and against other world currencies. What country is that all the way at the bottom? That would be Mexico. That would be the Mexican peso. So suddenly, without having to get sworn into office or putting his team in place or signing any executive orders, just by putting out a Truth Social post saying that he intends to levy a 25% tariff on Mexico if they don't close their border and do something about fentanyl, the Mexican peso absolutely craters. This is how you affect change. This is how you actually make a difference, right? And by the way, the Financial Times reporting that the president of Mexico, who is a Trump-hating socialist, she pushed back on the idea of tariffs. But if you read between the lines, you'll hear that she got the message and she's actually going to do something. Here, read along with me. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum hinted at retaliation over U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's proposed tariffs. Yeah, get into a trade war with us, Claudia. See how that works out for you. On her nation's exports on Tuesday, as the peso slid against the dollar, Trump vowed on Monday night to impose tariffs of 25% on all imports from Mexico and Canada in his first day in office, accusing the two countries of failing to do enough to curb illegal migration and drug trafficking. Quote, the phenomenon of migration or the consumption of drugs in the United States will not be dealt with by threats or with tariffs, Sheinbaum wrote in a letter to the next U.S. president, which she read out at her daily press conference. One tariff will come in response to another, and so on until we put shared companies at risk, she said. Sheinbaum added that tariffs on such companies were not acceptable and would cause inflation and joblessness for the U.S. and Mexico. All right, so don't get distracted by that. This is the president of Mexico saying, well, you can't do that. It'll cause a problem. Don't do that. We'll tariff you, and then we'll have a big trade war, and we don't want that. Okay, but then keep going. On Tuesday morning, the Mexican peso shed 1.7% against the U.S. dollar, adding to a sharp depreciation this year, while the Canadian dollar fell 0.7% to a four-year low. The Mexican president added that Trump was probably not aware of the work Mexico was doing on migration, saying that U.S. border control apprehensions of undocumented migrants were down by 3/4 from last December, and that tons of illicit narcotics had been seized. See, that's the key. At the end there, after all the threats and all the saber rattling and whatever, she then said, oh, and by the way, we're doing all we can. We're working really hard. We are doing what Trump wants. We're doing exactly what Trump wants. So if he just, has a little patience, we'll go ahead and do exactly what he wants, but please don't levy any tariffs. See, that's the main takeaway. That's what Mexico did. Now, what did Canada do? Well, let's take a look at their young child prime minister. I don't think he's going to be there much longer past this election season up there, but let's see what he had to say.
Bonjour tout le monde. I had a good call with Donald Trump last night again. We obviously talked about laying out the facts, talking about how the intense and effective connections between our two countries flow back and forth. We talked about some of the challenges that we can work on together. It was a good call. This is something that we can do, laying out the facts, moving forward in constructive ways. This is a relationship that we know takes a certain amount of working on, and that's what we'll do. One of the really important things is that we be all pulling together on this. The Team Canada approach is what works. That's where, putting aside partisanship, that's where I reached out immediately to Doug Ford to agree with him that we would have a First Ministers meeting this week to talk about the United States, talked with François Legault and some other premiers as well. There's work to do, but we know how to do it. J'ai eu un bon appel avec Donald Trump hier soir.
Yeah. Then he goes to Quebecois. Does that seem like a confident man to you? Does that seem like a man who is striding the world stage and is in charge of North American trade policy? Does he seem co-equal to Trump's stance? No, he's groveling. That is, by the way, a politically dead man walking. I would be shocked if he won the upcoming general election and continues as Prime Minister of Canada. But you can see, yeah, we talked with, I had a really good conversation with Trump, and we're going to do what we can to work with him. And that's not the defiant Justin Trudeau that you saw over the last 4 years, and certainly during the Trump presidency. Now, listen, I don't think I'm breaking any new ground by telling you that the threat of tariffs is really more powerful than tariffs themselves. Everybody who lights their hair on fire is saying, we can't have tariffs, we can't have tariffs. Well, okay, maybe you should be saying that once we have tariffs and then you see the ramifications from it and repercussions. Understand something. I don't think we've ever had a more free trade president in the last century than Ronald Reagan. But Ronald Reagan found certain things that needed to be tariffed. He levied tariffs against some companies in Japan who were not competing fairly with America. Ronald Reagan, Mr. Free Trade, Mr. Supply Side Economics, he levied tariffs on Japan during his presidency. But even levying tariffs isn't necessarily the big issue here. It's the threat of levying tariffs. That's what actually is in play here. Trump can't levy a tariff. He's threatening to do it 2 months out from actually taking office, and it's already seeing benefits. I'm not in any way inspired by the Holy Spirit with some gifted knowledge to be able to tell you that this is really about threatening with tariffs rather than actually employing tariffs. I only know this because unlike my counterparts in legacy media brands like CNN and MSNBC and broadcast networks, and unlike them, I actually pay attention to the news. I actually follow what the newsmakers connected to Donald Trump have said in the past. And here's what I saw. And by the way, if you watch this program, you saw it too. About 2 months ago, Howard Lutnick, part of the transition team, an advisor to Donald Trump, your future commerce secretary on CNBC, spelled it out for anyone if they were paying attention.
And of course, it's a bargaining chip. We can't sell a Ford or GM in Europe. You go to Europe, you can't sell a Ford or GM. Why? There's 100% tariffs. How about in Japan? 100% tariffs. So do you think if we said, we're going to tariff you the way you tariff us, do you think they're going to allow Mercedes and all these Japanese companies and Porsches and BMWs to all of a sudden have 100% tariffs in America? Of course not. They're going to come and negotiate, and their tariffs are going to come down. And finally, Ford and General Motors are going to be able to sell in these places.
How's that sound, Andrew? That sounds.
Of course they're going to come down. Of course. This is just negotiating.
It absolutely makes sense. If you do it strategically, if it's across the board, it creates a real problem. And the question is whether you believe the president is going to do it strategically or across the board. He keeps saying it across the board.
All right. So, and again, unlike Joe Biden and the current regime, Donald Trump is not a man of shades of gray. Everyone tries to figure out, what is Trump really doing here? What is he really thinking? Is he playing 4D chess? It's like, no, after several years of watching Donald Trump, it's actually quite simple. Donald Trump says what he says, and he does what he means to do. And he does it for basically the reason that he ends up doing it. And unlike Joe Biden and Democrats and people who like to do things halfway, it's like, okay, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to come up with a very narrow, hand-selected group of tariffs to come after you with. It's like, wow, that's going to strike fear in the hearts of these countries and corporations who are screwing us left and right. No. What you do before you sit at the table to negotiate is, all right, all of you are going to face across-the-board tariffs if you don't step up and fix this. And then you get in and then you start talking and it's like, all right, well, this is what we're going to do. But it's a negotiation. If these people ever negotiated, this is supposed to be a business channel, for God's sake. Get used to it. Things are going to be a little different. And yes, it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster ride, but do yourself a favor. If you want to figure out exactly what's happening here on the international stage and in the business world and what our government's policies are going to be and how we're going to affect change when it comes to working with adversaries across the table from us, do what I did. Read The Art of the Deal. It's incredibly enlightening. Like President Trump, Tom Homan and the new team for border security have already indicated exactly what they're going to be doing on day one with regard to securing our border and then going after criminal illegal aliens. They face deportation. Why? Well, because that's what the law is. It is literally the law of the land right now, that if you're in this country illegally, you're a criminal, you get kicked out. Not taken care of, not given parole, not flown from New York to Georgia so you can murder some young woman out for a jog. No, you're apprehended and you're deported. That's the law. Don't like the law? Change the law. Well, there are a lot of Democrats in this country who run big cities and states who have decided that not only do they not like the law, but they don't like the idea that the law will be enforced. And so they've spoken out and they've said they're going to defy the Trump administration, defy federal law, defy federal law enforcement, stand their ground, and go to jail if they have to. Like this guy.
I would certainly protest it, and I would expect other residents would do the same.
Trump's new borders czar, Tom Homan, has said that he is willing to arrest leaders like yourself for standing in the way of these policies that they want to enact. Would you be willing to go to jail for these things?
Yeah, I'm not afraid of that. And I'm also not seeking that. I think the goal is we want to be able to negotiate with reasonable people how to solve hard problems. Republican and Democratic presidents in the past have all tried to find solutions to these problems. President Reagan helped people get access to work so they could stay and support themselves. Biden and Harris worked on restricting entry at the border to close down. There are a lot of ways to approach this problem. We don't think it has to come to this. But yeah, I think when you look at, Ralph Carr has always been one of my heroes. He was the governor who in the middle of the internment of Japanese Americans said this was the wrong thing to do. And he stood up. It was unpopular. People were mad at him about it. That was in the middle of a wartime. If the president or any of his actors are going to do things that we think are illegal or immoral or un-American, we'll stay.
All right. So that beta male is Mike Johnston. He is the the mayor of Denver, Colorado. A couple things here. To compare the deportation of criminal illegal aliens to the internment of Japanese American citizens is foul and despicable and disgusting. Okay. Those were American citizens who were wrongly interned during World War II. Their lives were ripped apart and destroyed by the American government against actual American citizens who were born here in this country. By the way, it was a Democrat who did that. Thank you very much. Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt during World War II. But this is not the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing, number one. Number two, did you just compare your policies with Ronald Reagan's? Ronald Reagan? I beg your pardon, but to paraphrase Will Smith, take my president's name out your mouth. You're not allowed to sit there, Mr. Beta Mayor of Denver, and defy reasonable, normal federal law with regard to criminals in this country who have no business being here. You're not allowed to compare that with anything Ronald Reagan did in his entire career. All right, so that's number two. And number three, put a jacket on. That's ridiculous. You're not Jim Jordan. You're not even close to Jim Jordan. Tom Homan, after that little interview that you just saw, with multiple camera angles, by the way, that was impressive. Tom Homan showed up on Hannity last night, and he responded directly to the mayor of Denver.
Tom, you heard this mayor out there in Colorado. I want to get your reaction to it, and I want you to be clear about who has jurisdiction: the federal government or state and local governments. And if you're a sanctuary state or city, are you breaking the law?
You're absolutely breaking law. All you have to do is look at Arizona versus U.S. You'll see these breaking law. But look, me and the Denver mayor, we agree on one thing. He's willing to go to jail. I'm willing to put him in jail. Because there's a statute. It's Title 8 United States Code 1324 III. And what it says is, it's a felony if you knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien from immigration authorities. It's also a felony to impede a federal law enforcement officer. So if we don't want to help, that's fine. He can get the hell out of the way. But we're going to go do the job. President Trump has a mandate for American people. We got to secure this country. We got to save American lives. And I find it shocking that any mayor of a city would say, President Trump's been clear, we want to concentrate on public safety threats and national security threats. I find it hard to believe that any mayor or governor would say they don't want public safety threats removed from their neighborhoods. I mean, I don't know what the hell is going on in Denver, but we're going to go and we're going to fix it. If you don't want to fix it, if you don't want to protect his communities, President Trump and ICE will.
That's right, because the people who live in those communities are American citizens, and they deserve protection, even if the mayor isn't going to give it to them. That's Governor Abbott, by the way, of Texas, as you know, joining Tom Homan during that interview. Governor Abbott was announcing the reservation of hundreds of acres of land on the border that he is handing over to the federal government for their use for detention centers during their efforts to keep the border secure. Things are already happening before Inauguration Day. Talk about an administration ready to hit the ground on day one. It's almost like, I mean, I hate to say this, but it's almost like having 4 years off from being president and then coming back in for your second term made Trump even more robust and on the ball to be able to get business done right away. He's been there. He knows what needs to take place. He knows how these agencies work, and he ain't going to waste any time with these, black tie balls and dancing and all that. He's done that. It's like, no, we're ready to go. Let's get to work. He can't wait. He absolutely can't wait. Meanwhile, there's another mayor stepping up and making the same threats or promises to be arrested and obstruct the law. You just heard Tom Homan. Your borders are coming up here, citing federal law that you are harboring and obstructing, and you're actually impeding a federal officer. You will be arrested. You will be incarcerated. Well, you don't have to go all the way to Denver for that to happen. Here is Mayor Mike O'Connor, no relation, thank God, of Frederick, Maryland. This is one county away from the District of Columbia border, and he's promising the same.
This election cycle did not go as I had hoped.
In response to Trump's national immigration policies, Frederick Mayor Michael O'Connor pledging to carve out space in his local budget for a legal advocacy fund, which would use tax dollars to pay undocumented immigrants attorneys' fees as they fight deportation.
Ensuring they have the legal support they need to stand strong and remain in this community they have chosen to call home.
O'Connor explaining his intention is to allocate the money to organizations already providing similar legal services, helping them expand the number of people they're able to support, although he's still determining the exact dollar amount to set aside. Some residents we spoke with supportive of the end goal.
I believe a lot of non-immigrant people also contribute to the country as well.
But all of them against their tax dollars footing the bill.
I'm torn.
I don't like the idea. I'd rather our taxpayer money go towards American citizens.
You break the law, it's just what happens. Nobody helped me pay for my attorney fees when I break the law. So why should we be paying for theirs out of taxpayer money?
But this comes at a cost. And this could be a very large cost for Frederick. And quite frankly, Frederick can't afford it.
Yeah, exactly. And let me just say one thing that just because I live in this area, I can tell you, Frederick, the city of Frederick, who this schmo represents, is part of the county of Frederick. Frederick County, Maryland, is represented countywide by a guy in the sheriff's office. His name is Chuck Jennings. He's now in his 5th term. And one of his signature policies as the sheriff of Frederick County is to cooperate with ICE with a robust cooperation program for the apprehension and deportation of illegal immigrants. This guy, the mayor of the city of Frederick, was just fine using tax dollars to pay for legal representation. I loved the man on the street responses there saying, yeah, not with my tax dollars. Hey, I don't know, maybe it's me. Why don't we use our tax dollars to help, I don't know, American citizens instead of citizens from another country? By the way, I keep hearing how they live here and they contribute. That means that they work, right? They work and contribute to our economy. Well, if they're working, maybe they can pay their own legal fees. I mean, or maybe Alex Soros, the son of George Soros, maybe he can dip into his pocket instead of funneling hundreds of millions of dollars to Democrat politicians or to district attorneys and states attorneys who let criminals walk out on the streets. Maybe he could spend some money defending these people instead of taxpayers in Frederick City. Something tells me this mayor will not win re-election if this is his policy leading up to Election Day. It's a remarkable turn of events. And if you're worried about your tax dollars being used for these purposes, you have every right to be. But it's not just at the city level in Frederick, Maryland. It's not just in Denver, Colorado. It's not at the state level where the governor of Illinois has decided that he's also going to resist and stand in the way, Wakanda forever, of Tom Homan deporting these people who shouldn't be here. Let's take a look at what's going on at the federal level. Just last week, Department of Homeland Security committee hearing had a remarkable revelation about the finances behind the illegal immigrant crisis in this country. You think this is just about asylum and humanitarian aid and trying to help our fellow man if they happen to come here because they're fleeing persecution in their home country? No. Like most things in the United States government, this is about the almighty dollar. There's big business in illegal immigration, big business and big money to be made. Your money. Take a look at this.
I'd like to ask Mr. Carroll and anybody else who would like to answer this. Can you name some of these NGOs that have specifically taken these hundreds of millions of dollars and not used it to protect these children?
Catholic Charities, Lutheran Family Services, Jewish Family Services. I spoke to a gentleman that works in DHS. He actually sends the electronic fund transfers, and I asked him, sir, tell me who you were, who do you send, who are you responsible for, and how much is the largest check you cut? He said, I'm over Jewish Family Services, and I cut a check for $600 million. And I said, is that for like 3 years? And he told me, JJ, get in the game. That's 2 or 3 months, and it's renewable. That's one NGO.
One NGO, that's a non-governmental organization. These are the charities that are positioned at the border and throughout the country to help clothe, shelter, feed, and transport the illegal immigrants that come into this country. One of them is getting a check cut for hundreds of millions of dollars every 3 or 4 months. That's why there's such powerful interest. And that's why these mayors are pushing back on this. You don't think they get some of that money in campaign contributions? You don't think that money funnels through the government agencies before it gets to the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs? Huge money. Our money. Your money. Are you sick and tired yet? Do you recognize why the election went the way that it went and why change has to happen really, really fast? I'm guessing you do. And it looks like change is on its way. We just have to wait 2 more excruciating months. But the good news is all these people, the mayor of Denver, the mayor of Frederick, these non-governmental organizations, people in the media, they're all freaking out already. Because Tom Homan, the border czar, Kristi Noem, director of Homeland Security, and yes, the president of the United States coming in 2 months, they have the audacity to actually enforce our laws as written. How dare they? Alrighty. Yesterday, right after this program, Special Prosecutor Jack Smith filed in a D.C. court his withdrawal of his charges against Donald Trump. Now, he filed them without prejudice. If you don't know what that means, it means it's kind of an Easter egg in this court filing that technically, theoretically, years from now, they could bring these charges back against Donald Trump. These would be the charges linked to the events of January 6th. You remember how excited everyone in the left was that Trump was finally going to be jailed for insurrection. In fact, charging him with insurrection means that he can't be president because of the 14th Amendment. Never mind the fact that none of Jack Smith's charges were for insurrection, which is, in fact, a federal law. You can't actually wage an insurrection against the United States government. So if, in fact, Donald Trump did that, you'd think that Jack Smith would have charged him with it. But that's neither here nor there. We'll get into the details of that in a moment. No, he withdrew the charges. He dropped the charges without prejudice. And boy, oh boy, are they upset all across the board here in the media because they had their hopes set on this. Hit hardest are the ladies on The View. Just about an hour ago, they reacted to it. And, well, follow the trail of tears right there on the Upper West Side of Manhattan because it's going to get slippery.
But I feel like I also think, even though everybody's been talking about how awful these picks are for the cabinet, I feel like some of the Republicans in Congress are going to have to step up, especially when you have somebody like Robert Kennedy Jr. You sent me a thing the other day that said that dengue fever is on the rise. Okay. I don't think these Republicans want to get dengue fever. I don't think that they want to get COVID. I don't think that they want their kids to not get the polio shot. So when it comes right down to them, maybe they will step up because it will affect them.
Well, I obviously did it again. That is
But
not.
I feel like
Hang on. I'll get the clip set up. Here's the problem when I get a thread of a lot of different clips, all from the same show, which Curtis Houck and the folks over and Nick Fondacaro over Newsbusters, they set up these all up. Sometimes when I prep these clips, the wrong clip gets loaded. All right, can we do it again, Kevin? What do you think? Are we on board with doing it again?
Go for it.
All right. What did I say? Trail of Tears. Floor's going to get slippery. Here's the view.
So after all that time and money, are we going to get a rebate? We're not getting any money back? Okay, well.
Nothing.
What do you think of it?
It kind of shows you there's no such thing as karma, doesn't it? I mean, it's like the Easter Bunny and affordable housing. It doesn't exist. I mean, I feel like eventually, I think we will get him out, but it's going to take a while. And let's hope that there's not too much damage that he does. And so if you think about what happened in the past, how long is it since Election Day?
It's in about it's been about 3 weeks.
About 2 years.
It feels like a decade, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that Kamala Harris says to American people, I'm going to help you buy a house. That did not resonate as much as they're eating cats and dogs in Ohio. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? We're in a weird sort of state right now.
Oh, poor Joy Behar. But then she moved on. By the way, did you catch that ominous "we'll get him eventually"? They're so deranged. They're so out of their mind, obsessed with Donald Trump. We'll get him eventually. See, it's not enough for them. I mean, they'd love to defeat him at the ballot box, but of course they can't. They proved that. They threw everything they could at him, but they still, the American people, and again, it's not about Trump. It's you. They're so angry at you for not doing what they wanted you to do, what they demanded you to do. Haven't you been watching us? Don't you know how awful this man is? But they're so obsessed that it's not enough for them that 4 years from now, he won't be president anymore. No, we got to get him. Alvin Bragg's going to get him. Jack Smith's going to get him. Fannie down in Atlanta's going to get him. We're going to get him somehow. We're going to impeach him again. We're going to get him. We got to get him. It's sick. And then she turned around and said, yeah, but it's time for the Republicans to step up here. You know, because listen, Republicans, just friendly advice. Listen, I'm not as smart as you. I can't win elected office like you. You're sitting on Capitol Hill. You're in the Senate. But if Joy Behar's giving you advice, you might want to just think twice about doing it, because I don't think Joy Behar has your best interests at heart. But that's just me talking.
I feel like I also think, even though everybody's been talking about how awful these picks are for the cabinet, I feel like some of the Republicans in Congress are going to have to step up, especially when you have somebody like Robert Kennedy Jr. You sent me a thing the other day that said that dengue fever is on the rise. Okay. I don't think these Republicans want to get dengue fever. I don't think that they want to get COVID. I don't think that they want their kids to not get the polio shot. So when it comes right down to them, maybe they will step up.
All right, so I'm sorry, but I have a responsibility as a member of the corporate-owned media to step in here and clean things up here because there was some misinformation just represented to you. Not by me, of course. No, I'm going to clean up the misinformation. It was Joy Behar and ABC News. She just suggested that by not getting a COVID shot, you are going to get COVID. In other words, if you get the COVID shot, that will prevent you from getting COVID. That's not true. We know that's not true. She just lumped dengue fever and polio and COVID all together here, suggesting that not getting the polio shot is the same as not getting the COVID shot. That's obviously medical misinformation. Sorry, Joy, that's just wrong. Also, I hate to hate to nitpick, but if there is an increase in dengue fever in this country, I don't know if it has anything to do with the inoculation schedule as much as it might have to do with the fact that millions upon millions upon millions of people have flooded into this country outside of our normal immigration protocols. And yes, a whole slew of them have snuck in without ever being detected or detained, which means they've come here without the usual inoculation schedule that we as a United States government demand on people when they come to this country. You know, they were back in the good old days. Have you ever taken I always hear from the left about, oh, how dare you offend the long tradition of mass migration the United States has always embraced. And they're right. We have a rich, wonderful history of welcoming immigrants in this country since our day of our founding. But we've always regulated that process. And they always point to the Statue of Liberty. Look at what's written on the Statue of Liberty. Okay? You got to let us bring in the tired, the poor, right? It's on a poem after all. So that's got to be our federal law. Okay, fine. Even if I accept your premise, which I reject, but if I accept your premise for a second, and that the poem on the base of the Statue of Liberty has got to be the guiding light of immigration policy, could you just move along New York Harbor there about a quarter mile from where the Statue of Liberty is? Because there's a big building there on another island. It's not Liberty Island. It's Ellis Island. Have you ever done the tour of Ellis Island? That was the holding place of all of those immigrants that came in the late 19th century and into the early 20th century. All those people, all the huddled masses coming in on those boats right past Lady Liberty, they stopped at Ellis Island. And if you do the tour, you'll see all these holding cells that we have on Ellis Island. And what were they being held for? Well, if they came into this country and they tested positive for a disease, because you see, we regulated all those huddled masses coming into our shores. We didn't just let them sneak in and show up one day and get a job illegally and get paid illegally. No. We regulated the migration of immigrants. And we tested them for diseases. And if they had a disease, they had to sit in a cell on Ellis Island. Take the tour. It's American history. It's a beautiful thing. They sat in a cell until they didn't have that disease anymore. And you know what else we did? We gave them inoculations for whooping cough, for swine flu, or whatever the hell else disease. Maybe dengue fever, Joy. Maybe it was dengue fever back there in the 1890s. But they sat there until they were well and they got their inoculations, and then they were allowed to come into our country. And, oh, by the way, they had to have a sponsor who would vouch for them and make sure that they fed them and gave them shelter and clothes so that they didn't become a ward of the state. And if they did become a ward of the state, they were shipped back to the country they came from. I'm all for embracing the spirit of the Statue of Liberty and the poem that was landed there, but can we actually adopt those policies too? Because we're a hell of a long way from that. So when Joy Behar sits there and says, oh, Republicans have to step up and they got to stop RFK because we've got dengue fever, my hunch is we don't have dengue fever in this country because people are a little hesitant to get a shot in their arm after being lied to by Anthony Fauci. I think maybe it's because people have come here from foreign nations, snuck in, and they brought dengue fever. But I do digress because we're really supposed to be talking about the reaction to Jack Smith dropping charges against Donald Trump. So let's turn to this guy who's super, super sad about it.
Does that mean you think there was an alternative to what Jack Smith did today?
Yes, I think there was an alternative. The alternative would have been to postpone further proceedings in the case until after he left office. Now, what Jack Smith did is seek to dismiss the case without prejudice. That means they can bring charges against Trump again once he leaves office. But it is nevertheless a very serious distinction because the status quo now is no charges against the president. You would have to upset that status quo to later bring charges again, as opposed to merely postponing the proceedings, in which case the presumption is they continue when he leaves office. Now, Jack Smith relied on the opinion of lawyers within the department who said that they thought it was required by the Constitution to dismiss the case, but it isn't required by the Constitution. There's nothing that would interfere with his performance of the office whether the case is dismissed without prejudice or merely postponed. So I think this is a serious mistake by the department. It compounds the mistake that you alluded to, which is they waited a year before they even brought this case forward or began the investigation. And then you have the Supreme Court with its immunity decision, and now you have a potential nominee in Pam Bondi who is saying she's going to prosecute the prosecutors. All of that goes against what Jack Smith said in his brief motion, which is that no one's above the law. So we're hearing that phrase a lot, but we're not giving validity to it by these actions.
What a smarmy little weasel he is. And you're right, nobody's above the law, but no one's beneath the law either. The joke around D.C. always used to be that a U.S. attorney can get bring a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. U.S. attorneys can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. That's right. And we're all supposed to chuckle about that. See, I hear that. I hear that a U.S. attorney can convince a grand jury to bring charges against a ham sandwich, and I'm terrified by that. I'm terrified by the idea that a U.S. attorney can bring charges with a grand jury against a ham sandwich, because guess what? I guarantee you the ham sandwich is innocent, right? Nobody ever thinks about that part of that old phrase. You've heard that phrase before. It's an old joke. Yeah, they can get a grand jury to bring an indictment against a ham sandwich. But what did the ham sandwich do? The ham sandwich is innocent. Ham sandwich didn't commit a crime. And that's the problem, see? And when you say Pam Bondi is going to come in and prosecute the prosecutors, if the prosecutors abused their power and abused the power of the Justice Department and the federal law against innocent people, they should be prosecuted. This little pencil neck geek shouldn't be concerned about prosecuting prosecutors as long as those prosecutors didn't break the law and abuse their power and violate people's civil rights. He's concerned because he's one of those prosecutors. By the way, one other point here, not to be too gratuitous, but I called him a pencil neck geek. I borrowed that, of course, from Donald Trump. If you remember when this guy, now a senator-elect from California, was just merely a congressman, and he abused his power as the chairman of the House Select Committee on Intelligence against Donald Trump at that time, leaking false information and lying about so-called evidence with regard to Russian collusion in the Trump campaign. At that time, Donald Trump called him a pencil neck geek. You remember that? And he used to joke about his shirt was always really tight and his neck was like this and he was doing this. Remember that? Have you noticed something? Have you noticed that Schiff no longer wears shirts like that? Look at that shirt. Blow it up here. Let's look at it big time. Yeah. Look at how he's got it's a nice loose fitting collar there. It's not quite as tight. Right? Or was it Rush? Was it Rush that called him pencil neck geek? I thought it was Trump that did it. Oh, well, Trump may have borrowed it from Rush. But look he's listened because he's not wearing those tight shirt collars anymore right up against his neck. And it's a little thing. It's a petty thing, but I enjoyed it. Now, if you get your news from other outlets, not MSNBC like that was, or CNN or the broadcast networks, you were prepared for yesterday's motion by Jack Smith. You were prepared if you got your news from other outlets, because at other outlets, they actually told the truth about these charges. For instance, Fox News, Jonathan Turley, law professor at George Washington University, he's been telling the truth about these charges from day one, and nobody on that outlet was surprised.
Well, this is what we expected. I wrote over a year ago that there was a good chance Jack Smith would never see the inside of a courtroom for a trial in this case. It made this election the largest effective jury verdict in history by re-electing Donald Trump. The special counsel found himself at odds with his own department's longstanding policy against the prosecution of a sitting president. But Smith did not go quietly into that night. I expect that he did get a lot of different opinions, hoping for the right one, but the OLC, this office that handles such questions, has long taken this position. So it would be doubtful that they would change it here. But, Smith had a sort of a gratuitous end to his term. He pushed not only for a trial before the election, and he pushed for months for that, but he also released damaging information before the election, something that many people saw as an effort to influence the election. Smith knew that if Trump won, he was out of a job. And this release of the information was entirely unnecessary. The judge admitted that it was procedurally irregular, but she went along with it. And I think that that did tarnish his position, and certainly in history, because he didn't have to do that. He had become so absolutely fixated on trying Trump before the election that he lost credibility, I think, with the courts. He went up to the Supreme Court. They didn't accept that that was the overriding consideration in looking at these legal issues. I think it's also very important to remember that Smith's case was riddled with constitutional problems. You know, when the Supreme Court reached its immunity decision, it was clear that he would have to pare down his indictment. He really didn't do it to the degree he needed to do. He took a very minimalist approach. He removed a few references, a few witnesses that stemmed from the first Trump presidency, but he largely just repackaged it. And some of us said that we thought that it was not enough, that if he ever did go to trial, he could be reversed just on that basis.
That's right. But of course, the entire prosecution wasn't about taking it to trial. It was about damaging Donald Trump. It was trying to levy charges against him that may make him ineligible to be on the ballot. They tried that in Colorado and Michigan and some other states. Supreme Court knocked that down as well. It was meant to give him a black eye and make him odious politically. The entire thing was a hit job, and it cost over $90 million just for this prosecution alone. That doesn't include the Robert Mueller prosecution. It doesn't include the two impeachments of Donald Trump. It didn't include the Mar-a-Lago raid. It didn't include that. Think about the tax dollars involved, utilized by the Democrats to hurt this guy politically, to use the law as a political weapon against Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Barack Obama's and Hillary Clinton's political opponent. That's what we've been through. And if you don't think Pam Bondi, the new attorney general, and whoever the new FBI director is going to be, if you don't think they should actually go line by line, page by page, office by office in the Justice Department to find out who did what and why, if you think that's revenge, then you're not paying attention. See, the biggest victim in all of this isn't Donald Trump. The biggest victim is you and me. See, we, the American people, we deserve to have faith in our judicial system. We deserve to have trust in our Justice Department and our FBI. I want to go back to the time when I think FBI agents are the cleanest cops on the planet. I want to go back to a time when an attorney general or a U.S. attorney announces an indictment against someone, and my instinct is, oh, that person must have done something bad. Instead, my instinct now is, ooh, I wonder whose side this guy woke up on the wrong side of, right? Because they have used the Justice Department and abused the Justice Department to such a level now where my instinct is, oh, this is all political. And that's damaging. It's incredibly damaging to this country and to us, the citizenry, because we deserve to have a robust Justice Department that actually goes after bad guys for breaking the law. But instead, we have politicians and media figures throwing around this word insurrection left and right. Insurrection, insurrection. He led an insurrection. He inspired an insurrection. He incited an insurrection. And I've said it before on this program, but I'll say it again. And you can take this to the bank and you can clip this out and you can share it on your Facebook page with your liberal son-in-law, or even worse, bring it up and cite it to your liberal mother-in-law at Thanksgiving dinner this week. If they start to throw insurrection around, January 6th was not an insurrection. Donald Trump did not lead an insurrection. He did not incite an insurrection, and no one involved in what happened on January 6th had anything to do with an insurrection. You know how I know that? You know how I know that? You know how you can say that definitively? Because insurrection against the federal government is, in fact, a crime. There is a law on the books, a U.S. federal statute against raising an insurrection against the federal government. The Justice Department has now investigated and arrested over 1,600 people involved with the events of January 6th, including Donald J. Trump. And do you know how many of them have faced charges for raising an insurrection against the federal government? Do you know how many of them have been charged with breaking that very statute, that federal law against insurrection? Do you know how many? Not one. It doesn't stop Rachel Maddow and George Stephanopoulos from saying, well, there was an insurrection. It doesn't stop Kamala Harris and Joe Biden saying he incited an insurrection. It doesn't stop politicians left and right slandering people. Listen, think what you will about January 6th. If you think it was bad, I agree with you. There was some bad stuff that happened on January 6th. You can call it a lot of things. But if you call it an insurrection, you're a liar. But this entire escapade, this entire Jack Smith investigation, this entire kangaroo court that was set up and finally diminished and closed down shop yesterday, the entire thing had very little to do with the law, and it had everything to do with politics. And it was funded to the tune of $90 million by your tax dollars through the Department of Justice. And that's the real crime here. And it's got to be fixed, and there's got to be accountability. If we're going to go forward as a nation of laws with the Justice Department charged with enforcing those laws, we need accountability. We need transparency. We need full exposure. Otherwise, we'll never really be able to heal. Now, I close up this conversation about Jack Smith and about this ridiculous fake prosecution of Donald Trump. I close it with one last commentary on the media. It's my favorite flashback involving Jack Smith. I want you to watch it with me. This is CNN. This is John King, specifically talking about the charges brought by Jack Smith. This was over a year ago, but boy, it resonates today. This is the most important piece of legal and political analysis you will ever see, coming right here from John King, the well-respected political reporter on CNN. Take a look.
And just one last point. Jack Smith, remember when the classified documents target letter, when Trump announced that, there was a lot of commentary. It was Jack Smith making a mistake here. Is he leaving this all to Donald Trump? And then they released the indictment and we all said, wow, wow. We read it. We saw the documentation. We saw the level of detail. Jack Smith going to Subway today is a message to Donald Trump. Donald Trump tries to intimidate people. He tries to bully people. He tries to scare you away. That was Jack Smith with no words and a simple $5 sub in his hand saying, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, the imagery was intentional.
Yeah, that's right. Jack Smith going to get a Subway sandwich. That spoke 1,000 words. The imagery was intentional. You can't bully Jack Smith. He's going to go get a Subway sandwich. How much conversation on that network and other networks about the Subway sandwich? Jack Smith went and got a Subway sandwich. In front of all the cameras, everybody saw it. He went and get a Subway. It's almost as powerful as Joe Biden getting chocolate chip ice cream. By the way, the $5 Subway sandwich from 2 years ago, it's about $9 or $10 now, thanks to your guy, John, in the White House. As the media continues to wring its hands and figure out why their ratings are down and why they're irrelevant and why people don't trust them, remind them of the time that was spent focused on the powerful imagery of Jack Smith getting a Subway sandwich. Yes, that Jack Smith, the guy who just wasted $90 million and just dropped charges against Donald Trump. But boy, he had a great Subway sandwich that day. I wonder if he got a 6-inch spicy Italian. That's my favorite. That is it for today. Do we have any unfinished business here, Mr. Kevin?
Nope, we're good.
All right, you guys rock. Thank you so much. I appreciate you watching me today. Make sure you share this. Make sure you throw it out everywhere. Make sure you, wherever you are, X, Facebook, I don't know. Do you guys still deal with MySpace or maybe Reddit? Same thing. Go ahead and share these links if you could. Tell a friend because we're building our audience every single day and it means the world to us. Thank you for all the love and support. And A reminder, tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern time, I'm filling in for the great one, Mark Levin. So take a listen if you'd like 3 hours of me. In the meantime, we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.